Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson, and produced in the studios of shortwave station WRMI in Miami. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, tribute to shortwave WYFR, Part 6, the early years at Hatherley Beach, our ancient DX report for 1905, and news of a new radio magazine with coverage of shortwave. It was 1939 that the pioneer shortwave station operated by the radio entrepreneur Walter S. Lemon was transferred from the city of Boston down south to what is now a beach resort area nearly 25 miles distant. This is what happened. Walter Lemon at WWBC, the Worldwide Broadcasting Corporation in Boston, applied for a construction permit for a second shortwave transmitter, and this CP was granted for 20 kilowatts W1XAR at an approved location in Norwood in suburban Boston on February 27, 1939. Work on the construction of this new transmitter was undertaken by the chief engineer, the well-known TV pioneer Hollis Baird. In the spring of this same year, 1939, two recently acquired mobile shortwave transmitters were taken to various locations in and around Boston for the purpose of making a series of test broadcasts in order to find a suitable location for a new permanent station. These two low-power portable stations, rated at around 250 watts or less, we would guess, were activated simultaneously at several different locations. Although it is not known just how many different locations were chosen for these test transmissions, yet it is understood that tests were made from at least 3 locales, 2 nearby locations in Norwood, in suburban Boston, and another down the coast at Hatherley Beach. On-air requests were made for reception reports for the test transmissions at each of the various locations, though there are no known QSL cards verifying these test broadcasts, due no doubt to the low power of the two transmitters. When the series of test transmissions was completed, a site in the Boston suburb of Norwood was chosen as the location for a permanent home for the two broadcast transmitters, W1XAL and W1XAR. The FCC gave approval for this move, though the official document showed the wrong address as 1218 State Highway, apparently one of the previously approved test locations. However, a subsequent FCC document corrected the address, which was a vacant area a little west of Providence Highway and north of Morse Street. The first test broadcast from the new W1XAR went on the air from Norwood on the same date as the CP was granted, February 27, 1939, and 2 frequencies were in use, 11,730 and 15,130 kilohertz. One QSL card in the Indianapolis Heritage Collection, dated March 19, 1939, shows the call sign altered to W1XAR, and it verifies reception on 11,730 kilohertz. This card was issued to a listener in Canada, and the timing would suggest that it verified a transmission from the very temporary site at Norwood. However, it was soon discovered that the new Norwood location was not as good as was previously expected, so the transmitter was closed down and returned to the Boston location at 870 Brookline Avenue. Thus it was that plans were enacted for relocation to an isolated spot further down the coast. Back around the time when World War I broke out in Europe, mid-1918, the American Army acquired a lease on a total property of more than 100 acres from several private owners at Hatherley Beach. This property was located just off the beach area, about 1.5 miles north of Scituate Town, and a spur line was installed as a connection to the nearby railway system operated by the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railway. During the war era, this property was in use as a storage area for war weapons and as a testing ground for different forms of ammunition. In 1921, the total area was returned to its original owners. In 1939, apparently not 1936, as sometimes listed, Walter Lemon took out a lease on a 40-acre section of what had been the Army Proving Ground, which included the main power plant building and a few smaller buildings. This isolated location became the home for the new transmitter facility of the mighty WRUW during the era of World War II. On July 21, 1939, the shortwave station in Boston was closed, and the equipment was moved into the radio property at Hatherley Beach. This included the two transmitters, the older W1XAL, WSLA, upgraded to 20 kilowatts, and the newer W1XAR, WSLR, at 20 kilowatts. And these were installed in the 20-year-old building that previously housed the Army power generation equipment. A new radiation system was installed, a total of 7 new antennas. This new radio broadcasting station was activated at this new location on August 25th. And then 13 days later, the call signs were amended again, and W1XAL, WSLA became WRUL, and W1XAR, WSLR became WRUW. Soon afterwards, the station call sign WRUL was painted on the large chimney stack on the radio property.
Ici, World Radio University, station WRUL, Boston.
These are the international broadcast stations WRUL and WRUW, worldwide broadcasting, Boston, United States of America. We are operating on frequencies of 15.29 megacycles in the 19-meter band and 11.73 megacycles in the 25.
At the time of the transfer from Boston to Scituate, Walter Lemon made an appeal for funding due to the heavy cost involved in the move and to the upgrading of the equipment. During the following year, the federal government provided a financial grant to the station because of its strategic location and significant coverage area towards Europe and Africa. In May 1940, WRUL was noted with test broadcasts in cooperation with shortwave station TG2 in Guatemala City. And during the year 1941, WRUL was noted with special programming that was on relay by the BBC London and by FZI Brazzaville in the Congo in Africa. Another special program from WRUL featured English refugee children giving greetings to their parents in England. And sometimes they were on the air with a program of practice in the usage of Morse code.
Because WRUL has a democratic principle, this give and take is important. Perhaps you have information which would be of interest to other listeners. Address your letters to the World Radio University, WRUL, Boston, Massachusetts, the United States of America. Our next feature will be a special Good Friday program in the Netherlands language.
In 1942, WRUL opened an additional studio in the center of New York City at 630 Fifth Avenue. And in September 1940, WRUL bought at a pretty good price the shortwave transmitter W4XB, WBKM, WDJM in Miami, Florida. This 1932 model homebrew transmitter was in reality 2 units at 5 kilowatts each. It took engineer John Hall more than a year to reassemble the pieces of equipment from Florida into a workable transmitter. And test broadcasts began in January 1942. This composite transmitter is sometimes listed wrongly under the call sign WRUX. However, all available monitoring observations, as heard in the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, give the call as WRUS. It is understood that the call WRUS was intended to identify WR for the company cluster of calls, and the final 2 letters US to identify the United States. This temporary auxiliary unit, WRUS, at Scituate, was on the air with 5 kilowatts on only one channel, 6040 kilohertz, the same channel when it was on the air as WDJM in Florida. As WRUS, it was sometimes heard as far away as Australia, and it always carried the same programming in parallel relay with the other 2 transmitters WRUL, and WRUW. This low-powered transmitter was retired in early 1943, and the temporary FCC authorization was canceled in April. This temporary WRUS was then replaced by a double 50-kilowatt transmitter with the same call sign. And that's our story when we look at the background history of shortwave WYFR on the next occasion.
Pomaže Bog, dragi prijatelji. Pustimo sada, nek nas radio sve spoji zajedno, dok putem raznovrsnih priloga, koji se odnose na čitanje i proučavanje Biblije, hvalimo Gospoda Isusa Hrista.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. The year 1905 saw many remarkable developments in the international wireless scene in many different countries. Some of these experimental developments turned out to be quite insignificant, whereas others proved to be highly significant in the further progress of mainstream electronic development. In England, the Marconi Company obtained a patent for what they called the directive horizontal antenna, the forerunner of what we call the curtain antenna today. The curtain antenna is a system of dipole antennas suspended from a cross wire attached to two strong, tall towers. All curtain antennas are active radiators, and on many occasions, another curtain antenna strung behind the active antenna acts as a passive reflector. In Germany, Professor Ernst Römer established two-way voice communication over a distance of 10 miles with the use of a modulated light beam. This procedure is quite successful, though it requires an exact focus of the light beam with no visible structure in between. At San Francisco in the United States, Major George Squier experimented with the usage of a tree as a transmitting antenna. This procedure can be quite successful, but there is a signal loss due to dissipation throughout the structure of the T. Still over in California, 17-year-old Francis McCarty gave a successful public demonstration of wireless with his transmitter in the carpenter basement of the Cliff House, and the receiver a mile away in the Cycler's Rest storeroom. The McCarty demonstration consisted of voiced messages, and he also sang 5 songs. Newspaper reporters were present for this occasion. The United States Navy conducted a mock sea battle off the continental East Coast, with one side using standard procedures for communication and the other side using wireless. At the conclusion of these mock hostilities, it was declared that the wireless-equipped Navy won the event. The Telmco commercial company in the United States placed an advertisement in 1905 for the sale of wireless equipment in the magazine Scientific American on November 25th. It has been suggested that this was the world's first published advertisement for the sale of wireless equipment. However, this cannot be correct due to the fact that 2 years earlier, the Clark Company placed an advertisement in another magazine, The Western Electrician, on May 23, 1903. The Clark Company was selling complete wireless sets for $50 each. Many new wireless stations, both temporary and permanent, were established in many different countries during the year 1905. In the United States, the Canadian experimenter Reginald Fessenden established a station at Brant Rock, Massachusetts. The American Navy established a series of 8 wireless stations in 8 different states along the Atlantic coast. Lee DeForest established a 50-kilowatt station on Coney Island, New York, and he began work on 4 stations, Key West, Florida, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and in the Canal Zone. Marconi completed the installation of a huge wireless station in Nova Scotia, Canada, and he began work on a new station at Clifton in Ireland. And Mr. H.G. Robinson obtained an experimental license for the purpose of conducting wireless experiments in public halls in Sydney, Australia. In the maritime scene, the first distress signal from an American ship was moored out from the lightship Nantucket No. 58, which sprang a leak at South Shoals, Massachusetts, and the Navy vessel Azalea rushed to the rescue, taking off all personnel before it sank. The Japanese ship Shinano Maru wirelessed a message out regarding the location of Russian ships during the Russo-Japanese War, resulting in the defeat of the Russian Navy. The Italian vessel Castagna was wrecked at the beach immediately below the wireless station at Wellfleet on Cape Cod, out from Boston. Those were some of the events of 1905.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Recently here in Wavescan, we brought you the news that the long-standing publication Monitoring Times is going to stop publication as of the December 2013 issue. Well, now we have news that a new electronic publication, the Spectrum Monitor, will follow the final issue of Monitoring Times, a print and electronic publication covering amateur, shortwave, and scanner-related topics, which ceases publication after a 33-year run following the retirement of its publisher, Bob Grove. Managing editor Ken Reitz, KS4ZR, made the announcement in the November issue of Monitoring Times. As accolades poured in, he said, all readers, regardless of how long they had been subscribers, expressed sadness and dismay at the closure of the magazine. I came to believe that there might be enough interest to warrant continuing the publication in some other form. I took it upon myself to explore the possibility of a follow-on magazine, not connected with Monitoring Times or Grove Enterprises, its publisher. The Spectrum Monitor will debut with the January 2014 issue on December 15, 2013, and will carry virtually all of the current Monitoring Times columnists and feature writers, Reitz noted. These are the experts in all facets of radio who've helped make Monitoring Times the best full-spectrum magazine available, and we are all excited about continuing our work for the new publication. Columnists will include Dan Farber on antennas, Hugh Stegman on utility stations, Fred Waterer with the Shortwave Listener, and Thomas Witherspoon of Ears to Our World with a column about the world of shortwave listening. The Spectrum Monitor will be available only as an electronic publication in PDF format, which may be read on any desktop, laptop, iPad, Kindle. Details on how to become a charter subscriber of the Spectrum Monitor can be found at www.thespectrummonitor.com. That's www.thespectrummonitor.com. Shortwave radio is used for many positive purposes around the world. One of them is education. At this year's meeting of the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters in Birmingham, Alabama, Brady Murray and Jerry Plummer of shortwave station WWCR in Nashville, Tennessee, talked about this and other interesting topics involving shortwave broadcasting. Today we present an excerpt from their presentation. The first voice you will hear will be that of Brady Murray.
All right, I am the operations manager at WWCR and also am working toward a Master of Education at Tennessee State University. And Doc is a full professor of Econ and MIS at Austin Peay State University. So he knows a lot about the education world, and I'm learning about it. In considering shortwave broadcasting as an educational tool, especially over this past semester at TSU, it's been put in the context of multicultural education quite a bit. And I wrote a paper that I turned in and presented just a couple of weeks ago, and I asserted that the first mass tool of multicultural education was shortwave radio. And I believe that to be true. And we were just talking with Charlie about, for example, electricity even not being available on a widespread basis in Madagascar. And I think it's 2/3 of the world is not wired. Even today, especially Dal Chow made several mentions of educational tools in shortwave. Something I saw on the screen on the tour this morning was a screen with the heading Faith and Culture. That was just today. And so not only over this past semester has multicultural education really been intertwined with shortwave radio, but even today, just since we've been here. And we're really all here for the purpose of education overall. As we look around and consider everybody's role in NASB and why we're here, we're educating folks about towers, about Adventist World Radio, about what's going on with World Christian Broadcasting. World Christian Broadcasting, I've got another thing that I'd like to mention. Music has a lot to do with culture, as we all know. And World Christian's magazine format is an excellent example of mixing in music with the message that they are spreading via shortwave. I think that you all use the magazine format with like current top 40 songs to keep people interested, which is something we really do a lot of in shortwave, is we aim to entertain and inform. And we do that in 15 and 30-minute blocks, excluding commercials and things that cause people generally to tune out. Another thing that Dal Chow said this morning was that the example of why would we broadcast overseas? And that really shows a lack of understanding. It's just like with DRM sets, for example. Why is $65 not good enough? Well, that really shows our lack of understanding here in the U.S. Maybe we can afford that, but we're broadcasting from North America elsewhere. And so I'm not really sure at this point what we do to fix that, but maybe the shortwave listeners in the U.S. Need to be more educated about what it is we do. And maybe that's something that the NASB can do as a group to let folks within North America know what it is we do and why what we do is so important. Another topic I have written down here is that educational philosophy in the U.S. has everything to do with interaction and inclusion. Here again, that's a place where shortwave radio is hugely important. We interact with folks, we read their letters, we do Ask WWCR, which is interaction, inclusion. Folks with no electricity, no internet, they're all included. They're all welcome in shortwave. And the same is true at TSU, where I attend. Nobody in the class that I presented this paper had any idea what shortwave was, and they were all very fascinated with its capabilities. It's very true. We're not here today because shortwave was the first tool, mass-scale tool for multicultural education. We're here because it remains the most effective tool to do that. And I think that's what we've found in both of our classes. It goes back to a quote on the HFCC homepage and maybe in other places that says something like, if shortwave were invented today, it would, and it's very positive. I don't know the quote exactly, but it's huge. And we need to reinvent this every day in every way that we can as organizations and as part of the NASB. We need to present this to people, and I think particularly in North America, because I think that people around the world are very familiar with it and very grateful and appreciative of it, and I think it's very effective. And I think the problems may be here at home, as far as educating people here at home. And I know that that's something that Doc has done, and that's something that I've been working on and am going to continue to work on.
You were listening there to part of a presentation by Brady Murray and Jerry Plummer at the 2013 annual meeting of the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters in Birmingham, Alabama, USA. Incidentally, Brady Murray was elected the new president of the NASB at that meeting. Last week on Wavescan, we mentioned that Radio Exterior de España would be shutting down its Costa Rican relay station to the Americas as of the new B13 broadcasting season on October 27th, and adding some transmissions from its principal transmitter site in Spain. Let me give you, we have now from Jose Bueno in Spain, the B13 schedule for Radio Exterior de España, and let me give you a list of the English language transmissions from REE for this new season, and there aren't very many of them. From, to Europe, transmissions to Europe on 9665 kilohertz from 1900 to 2000 UTC in English, and that is Monday through Friday. Also on 6125 kilohertz from 2200 to 2300 UTC on Saturday and Sunday. Now to Africa in English, 9605 kilohertz, 1900 to 2000 UTC, and that's Monday through Friday. And finally to North America, one transmission every day on 6055 kilohertz from midnight to 0100 UTC. The new schedule in English for Radio Exterior de España. And we end today's edition of Wavescan with some Brazilian music, Felicidades, played by a Venezuelan, Jonathan Bolivar, who lives in Austria, if you can believe it. And it's from his album Tierra del Sol. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the International DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. Thanks to Ray Robinson for the audio clips of WRUL. Next week, 100 Years of Wireless and Radio in Bulgaria, Part 10, the International Clandestine Scene, and our Japan DX report. If you'd like a Wavescan QSL card, you can send your reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. And we always enjoy hearing from you by email as well at wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami. Till next week, good listening, everyone.